Long after Hollywood had stopped whispering her name, a collector in San Diego purchased an old Leica camera from an estate sale. Inside the camera was a partially used film roll, never developed, never exposed to light until 2021. When the photos were finally printed, most were harmless snapshots of beaches and palm trees. But frame number 17 made the lab assistant freeze. It showed a woman in oversized sunglasses, pale scarf, and a familiar tilt of the head, taken decades after Marilyn Monroe's death. The timestamp burned at the bottom of the frame was the impossible part. August 5th, 1984. Exactly 22 years to the day after Monroe's official time of death. Experts called it a double exposure. Others claimed it was staged. But the angle, the lighting, the candid smile, none of it fit a modern recreation. There was no actress hired, no record of a look-alike in that location, and the background showed a diner that had been torn down in 1978. The assistant kept staring at the print, uneasy, yet unable to put it down. It wasn't fear that unsettled him. It was the unmistakable familiarity in the smile, almost grateful, almost relieved, as if the moment captured wasn't intended to haunt, but acknowledge. The camera's previous owner, a retired military photographer named Henry Dalton, was easy to trace. He lived quietly in Arizona. No social media, no interviews, no family listed. And when contacted about the mysterious photo, he hesitated for a long, heavy breath before agreeing to speak, but only over the phone. Henry's voice was shaky, aged and solemn. "I didn't take that picture," he opened with, almost offensive. But the camera belonged to someone who believes she never really left. He explained that the camera had been gifted to him in the 70s by a man named Carter Blake, an entertainment publicist who worked near Hollywood Boulevard during Monroe's final years. Carter, according to Henry, was obsessed, not with conspiracy, but with regret. He helped create the image, Henry said, the smile, the poses, the myth. And he spent the rest of his life wondering if the myth was stronger than the woman. Before hanging up, Henry paused and added something unexpected. "Carter swore he saw her once," he said quietly. "Not in 1962, much later. Same scarf, same walk. He never took a picture. He was too afraid she'd disappear if he blinked." The line went silent. Then Henry ended with a whisper, as if confessing to the past itself. And he said she wasn't sad, just tired. The next lead came from the background of the mysterious photo, an old chrome-trimmed diner with a flashing neon sign that read Blue Finch Cafe. Records confirmed it closed in 1978 and was demolished 4 years later. But locals from that era remembered something odd. Customers kept reporting seeing someone who looked just like Marilyn, sitting alone in the corner booth by the window, always at night, always wearing a white scarf and sunglasses. Some swore she ordered only tea. Others claimed she simply sat without touching anything. One server recalled that when she approached the table, the woman vanished, not in a dramatic cinematic flare, but like someone stepping away while no one was watching. A former police officer said he responded to a call where a group of teenagers insisted Marilyn Monroe smiled at them from inside the empty diner. When he arrived, the cafe was locked, lights off, no sign of entry. Yet the jukebox inside was softly playing "I Want to Be Loved by You." Years later, the foundation still bore the cafe's outline, cracked and reclaimed by weeds. But visitors sometimes reported hearing faint singing carried on the breeze, a whispering voice, melodic and breathy, drifting just long enough to question, then fade. Curiosity became obsession for the lab assistant Mark. He pinned the print above his desk, studied every pixel of film grain. The face was slightly turned, but the curve of the lips, the iconic half smile, was unmistakable. He decided to leave a note beneath the photo, half joke, half invitation. "If you're still out there, why come back?" The next morning, the note was gone. Not crumpled, not fallen. Gone. In its place was a tiny smudge on the glass, as if a fingerprint dragged diagonally downward. Lab security cameras showed nothing except a brief static flicker at 3:17 a.m., the same minute Monroe's death was pronounced. Mark tried handwriting comparison, oil smudge testing, but the fingerprint was too faint to analyze. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in anomalies. Yet anomalies don't replace handwritten notes with fingerprints. That night, as he locked up, the overhead radio flickered on. A soft, vintage voice floated through static, faint but recognizable. Breathy, intimate, almost like an old performance recorded underwater. "Some people never understood me." The radio cut off. Mark stood alone in the dark, understanding finally that curiosity might not be the safer choice. Acknowledgement was. Mark wanted corroboration, so he contacted retired archivist Eleanor Price, who reportedly cataloged thousands of Hollywood reels during the 60s and 70s. When he mentioned the photo, the line stayed silent, longer than polite, longer than comfortable. Finally, Eleanor exhaled, not startled, but as if a memory she had sealed shut had been unlocked without her consent. "You found another one," she said quietly. "Not a fake, not a rumor. Another one." Eleanor explained she once received an anonymous envelope in 1989 containing a photograph. Black and white, grainy, but unmistakably Marilyn's profile, taken in front of a theater that had closed decades earlier. She archived it for a week before it disappeared from storage without any record of removal. "What did you do with it?" Mark asked. "What everyone did," Eleanor replied. "Pretended it never existed." Before he could ask anything else, her tone shifted. Stern, almost protective. "Whatever you think this is, don't assume she came back for applause." Mark hesitated. Then for what? Eleanor paused again. This time, the silence felt like respect. "Some stars spend their lives being seen," she said softly. "Maybe the afterlife is their chance to finally be noticed." The call ended, not abruptly, but like a curtain closing. A breakthrough came when Mark enlarged the edges of frame 17, not her face, but the blurry reflections in the diner window. The reflection wasn't modern. It showed old cars, old clothing, and a neon sign with its original typography. Details that would require extraordinary research and a film crew to recreate precisely. But one element stopped Mark cold. In the reflection, faint but undeniably there, was a movie poster with a release date that made no sense. A film advertised as "Coming this fall 1984, with Marilyn Monroe listed above the title. A movie she never made. A movie that never existed. A movie the world didn't know to invent. Was the image fabricated? Was it from an alternate timeline? A studio concept that never went public? Or something else entirely? An imprint of possibility rather than memory? Mark consulted a photography historian who insisted the reflection was not digitally altered. "You're not looking at a moment that happened," he said slowly. "You're looking at a moment that might have." The historian suggested a stranger idea. Sometimes fame traps a person in the version the world expects. Maybe she wasn't showing where she was. Maybe she was showing where she should have been. Mark decided to keep the film locked away in his desk drawer, just until he could rationalize everything. But rationalizing became impossible when the camera that contained the roll, locked in a separate storage cabinet, showed up the next morning sitting on his desk, upright, lens facing him, as if waiting. Security footage showed the cabinet door simply opening at 2:14 a.m., the same time Marilyn's iconic performance of Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend had premiered on live television decades earlier. No figure entered the room, no tampering. The camera just moved. Mark approached it cautiously and noticed fresh fingerprints on the shutter release. Thin, delicate, unmistakably feminine. He lifted the camera, and a faint warmth radiated from the metal, like someone had just been holding it. Suddenly, the camera triggered itself. Flash. White light swallowed the room for a millisecond. When Mark blinked the blur away, the instant photo slid out. Blank at first, but slowly developing into an image. He watched shadows merge into form. A woman's silhouette in a satin dress, head turned slightly, the suggestion of glossy curls. Her lips were parted, caught somewhere between a sigh and a secret. On the bottom edge of the photo, in faint silver letters, a handwritten message appeared as if surfacing from the paper. I was more than the story they told. Mark placed the two photographs side by side, the one from 1984 and the one that developed itself. Different eras, different outfits, but the same presence, the same softness in the expression. Not seeking attention, not haunting. More like someone asking to be seen clearly for the first time. He returned to the abandoned diner's location, now an empty lot, fenced off for future construction. Night air was still. Streetlights buzzed. Mark stood where the corner booth once existed and whispered into the quiet. If you were more than the story, what was the truth? A gentle breeze stirred. The faint, nostalgic glow of a neon blush flickered against the rusted metal fence, just for a second, like a sign illuminating a stage. And over that hum, carried on air that smelled faintly of old perfume and dust, came a voice no louder than breath. Not everything loved is understood. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't an invitation. It felt like closure of a life lived in flashbulbs and scripts written by others. Mark looked at the empty space where shadows once gathered. The diner was gone, the cafe demolished, the myths louder than the woman. Maybe ghosts don't return to haunt. Maybe they return when the world finally pauses long enough to listen. Some stories don't end. Some simply wait for the audience to hear the last line.